Huh. I was just thinking a little about some science that's underneath everything. It can be correcting things a bit because you've got Google programmed a bit like, so it's only going to be programmed to have something. So it could say enzymes are of no import because it just is that all doctors are only looking at the blood and they weren't looking where how enzymes get transported, which is through the immune cells instead. So because they didn't find it in the blood, they said, oh, well, enzymes must be all destroyed. And after that point, a lot of misinformation's been. But what differentiates this work more from others, you've got the colloid of life cycle, which starts with the colloid of life as the smallest building block of life and forms into a spore. And then that spore forms with another spore, which is a double spore. And that double spore is the building block that makes up. Double spores are all making up the organelle interior of a cell, and each organelle there, interior of a cell, has its own reproductive schedule and things. And you've got ubiquitin 1, 2, and 3, which is like assist to help, correct DNA and this sort of thing. And you've got a life colloidal transmutation going on, where the intestinal tract is, where one nutrient can be turned into another and one element can be turned into another. You also, in this work, have pleomorphism, is where tissue that is in fermentive forms of life colloid. This is an example of pleomorphism, where only monomorphism, meaning something doesn't ever change its form, has been what's been taught, which is incorrect. You've really got how blood is formed, which might we talk just a bit about. I'd say that because all of the organs only perform a preferential role and not what differentiates this work a little bit more from others, and could cause people to be opened up a bit more wherever you get. Where the study of magneticity is, you learn that that's not electricity, but magnetic. And so all ever is put in terms of a JC quanta, and unique science is underneath everything. That's kind of what we should. Of course, there's things which somebody should do where you are listening. For instance, microscopic look at their blood. You're going to be able to see live blood and also oxidate. And it's in what's an ideal medium, more or less, for you to be able to visualize and gain an immediate insight into your overall health status, for instance, you see. So if you're looking at indicators, various information could be given to you, see, sort of about the thyroid or about heavy metals or about the liver or spleen and some organ. So it's really incredible that somebody could look at your living blood. And so it's incredible, of course, because you could get an oxidative stress test done on the blood, and that could show where heavy metal is and this sort of thing, and the time frame when that came in, and it's quite extraordinary. So in the idea that, for instance, the blood is flowing before a heart is formed in embryology, and thyroid, where you've got organs and things which could have been removed, but yet some function has picked up where that is, and that all the organs perform a preferential role of something, but within the sole role of this itself, per se. So if you could imagine you've got an enzymatic life food, you also, where this is you've for sure got the amino acid glutathione, and that's low. It should be. And you keep methionine low as well, because you've kept flesh and bean out simple. And then everything does combine. And this is more a low phosphate diet, enzymatic attention to, and prepared in a way to make it easy to digest. And this really is what wards off malady. And you could see interior of a cell, the organelle, and they have their own reproductive schedule like we're talking about. And you can see the circumstance, for instance, where tissue, like an organ, might have been removed, and maybe there were tissue left, or no, all the tissue was removed. And we could see where material should ordinarily be, there's a continued production of certain things. And so the big thing for where the thyroid is, if you imagine, is thyroxine and a biologically active form of it, which is triiodothyronine, which is T3. And so enzymes allows you to be able to convert what T4 is, which really is iodide, which iodine loves to only attract itself to another iodine molecule. And so you always have iodide pretty much in nature. And providing that that's enzymatically linked, it could be snipped apart and then used. So T3, triiodothyronine, is derived from the conversion of T4, of course. And within various tissues, you can see this going on, a process which involves, like we're just talking about, enzymes. And these are deiodinases. So, for instance, it's typical that where something could have much more efficacy shown to be where things are like grapefruit and its capacity, for instance, give you good statin power and things. Yet if somebody was having a drug which can't be broken down properly, it actually doubles more the impact that the drug would have. And so they'll say, oh, well, if you're on that chemical, it shouldn't be that you have any grapefruit. It's sort of interesting, okay? So where through the ages, of course, like a long time past, all sorts of conditions related to thyroid function or not. And we've got herbs like ashwagandha, which is extremely supportive and mimics natural forces. And so if somebody's having a drug, for instance, it could double that force, you see. So because the drug isn't necessarily being used in that circumstance, but it's going everywhere and having an effect where it's over the top. So where a drug is, it's iodine that's connected to another iodine molecule as iodide, and it's magnetically stuck to itself. Enzymatically, it can't be snipped apart. It's quite difficult and functions as a heavy metal after this point, you see. So impacting our physiology, you have cell absorption and increasing less where some thyroid hormone is or isn't. And so you've got studies where, for instance, we're just talking about where someone could have had a thyroid removed and they've been taking a T3 or T4 and things. And so where ashwagandha is, it really would have boosted that level of T3 and T4, and it lowers thyroid stimulating hormone. And the more that you see going on, you can tell there's a lot more that's behind what all this is than what the eye meets. And where one has thyroid tissue that's removed, they could ever be more able to produce micronutrient and things, absorption more through mitochondria, more or less. And so these are things which should be a focus on for sure. So where it's less relied that something less is to have the same effect, like thyroid stimulating hormone could remain more level, it shows that if you've reduced the synthetic T4 where that was, where observation is that you could see that it slows the thyroid function, and T4 really causes a build-up. It can, if it's synthetic, and having ashwagandha can have caused things to be applied and used more natural and be cleared away. But then what happens where that amount of drug was and it not necessarily being used, but it causing something to be overboard where things are. So it's a remedy where someone could look at what the proper group think is, to look to see that synthetics, for instance, of iodine, it is iodide, not iodine, and because it's chemically stuck. But chemical synthesis of those are things which, like the synthetic, starts with a chemical compound called tyrosine, which is an amino acid. And in industrial processing, you can see how this creates a molecule which is similar to thyroxine, and what's naturally produced which this synthetic isn't, because, like I said, its iodine is stuck together with another iodine molecule, and it's stuck there. So it's functioning as a heavy metal. So, and also to where tyrosine would be ordinarily, that's quite an aromatic amino acid. And so if somebody's just taken that and ceramided it and put this together, it's sort of really, that's what we're talking about, you see. So where the ablation could have been where thyroid tissue was, and the practice is where anyone is, an organ, like we're just talking about, performs a preferential role, but not the whole sole role of some function that's going on per se. So the thyroid can be the result of live food, where somebody is consuming things this way as far as its functioning concerned in the body, or it could be just a dead food diet. So if somebody's getting aromatic amino acid, well, how good is that? But in dead food, it's not going to be working because it doesn't have proper zeta potential. And it's like a synthetic thyroid. So when when you combine iodine that's synthetic, it's iodide, it's not iodine. And where something is natural, like found in dulse, you've really got an enzymatically linked usable form. And this is really something which, if it's with a small amount of ashwagandha and things, you'd be surprised how much of the medication or synthetic do you need to have. So those are things which somebody could look at and ask whoever's there working with you to look into this. So it really can cause you to have something observable ever more over time, and you can have an awareness of how what this does more, where something can be assisting you. You've got more live food, you're bringing this in, and energy metabolism is functioning better because you're not having the combos that's causing somatostatin to be raised, which blocks and stops human growth hormone or other things. So iodine is iodide always, typical, because, as I said, you only can find two atoms stuck together. But if it's enzymatically linked, how good is that? So where sea vegetable could be micronutrient is, and which the body produces thyroxine as T4, and it breaks down to T3, so it's a usable form. And it's the synthetic that certain is of some toxic dimension to some degree, and not necessarily fully, properly ecological. And it is where the concern of that is, you've got levothyroxine and things which cause drug-induced lupus and induced all sorts of changes in DNA, histamine and histone complex. So you've got autoimmune response also. So it's just something which you're looking at as a variable, and yet, it's just sort of an example of what some toxin could be, where you've got a synthetic, and what's the value of focusing on things which is natural and doing what you can to see that you could help correct and stabilize where symptoms are. And so what anybody's response is more for what's natural, and somebody could be looking into the value of sea vegetable, some, of course, and some ashwagandha, for instance. And so it's possible in this instance, as we're talking a bit about, which it's a metaphor for, like, what could you do where things are. Yet if some synthetic version was, what's the fitness level that you have, where some adjustedness is, that you could have some leeway to look to feel what could work. Symptoms, of course, disappear, and it's possible that you could have a feeling more of something being more total where this is. So the thyroid has all of the blood pass through it every 15 minutes. It's the second most vascular organ in the body. I mean, that tissue, it gathers wherever needed element is. This is nutrient which goes into the cellular membrane and into the life colloid mitochondria of cells. And where phosphate would have been high, You've got an extraneous rock salt also, could be, yes, typical. And you've got calcium carbonate in beer and things like that. And someone could be eating a diet which has really raised somatostatin every time they ate. And so silica then is the element that first starts to be modest, where tissue is like the thyroid. If we can go over what could have occurred more. So iodide is stored where the tissue is there. And if deficiencies exist, heavier metals could have come in. And this is something which causes goiters and all sorts of conditions that could have seen neoplastic conditions of the thyroid. And so you've got a protein complex, carbs and fat combo as a dead food, and a massive deposits of phosphate from the bean and glutathione on the thymine. So the thyroid tissue, wherever all the body, matter of fact, has some degree of inflammatoriness and causing the condition for the body to pleomorph more into fermentive life colloid and be organizing itself from aerobic glycolysis instead of oxidate metabolism. And so that combo that we've been talking about, it other than allows the stomach or the pancreas to function after that. And typical one could see is more thyroid enlargement, the wings to create more calcium to be stepped up and this sort of thing. But where no fresh herb was, no aromatic herb was either, no enzyme ever was, and the stress metabolism which caused silica deficiencies, things which the diet can be corrected, like what we're talking about with live food. Otherwise, autoimmune conditions like Graves' disease, Hashimoto's, also thyroiditis, you're looking at neoplastic thyroid nodule, and these are things which all could come to be just because you've treated something else and you did that with antacids, for instance. It's got massive amounts of heavy metal in it. And the exposure of thyroglobulin from bean and bromide from bleached flour and glyphosate that was put where cereal is and things. And then all plant-based milks, which is really got lots of calcium carbonate in it as well. You've got heavy metals and like rock salts and things which form where the thyroid injury is and inflammation. And Jubb cell rejuvenation targets this function, and where somebody has no longer got the gland, tissue and things still can be stressed from what somebody did, which caused an organ to no longer function like it should, but that all these organs can heal up if you give things a chance. So if you compensate and you have the inability to produce thyroid hormone and some dewness is going on where it's actually, there's got a cystic fibrotic condition underneath everything, thyroid and its neoplastic condition always could have got kicked off with a toxin like the antacid that would come in there and over time accumulate. And so an ulcerated stomach was done to stop that apparently, but the small intestinal ulcerations and campyloritis, the tissue breaks down into, and the stomach and the intestinal lining does, and so that life colloid could multiply and survive more where an acid environment is, and so ulceratedness of tissue could be, and it's just that the Tums or whatever somebody did do, all of that had a lot of heavy metal in it, and where did that go, you see, where tissue was stressed. So after eating, where an attack could have gone on late, more at night, and then in the morning the stomach wasn't emptied, and bloating and nausea, and somebody couldn't eat for a bit, or even stools which are more tarred out or darkened, or sometimes a bit of blood where things are. But where severe cases of its presence is sometimes sick, it was just stirred up a lot more by antibiotics that was given. And so it's really the heavy salts, which is non-stop, to stop acid burn, for instance, in that circumstance, and a massive clearing away afterward of what is, you can see it in enlarged goiter and amounts of this rock salt and things, or where the tissue is, and especially calcium phosphate and calcium carbonate. So you combine where anyone is where the story is here. And you could also see a whole range of things like asbestos, certain where materials was used, and these all things compromise the body, of course, and life-threatening disease where metal exposure is. The thyroid tissue is certain, just like the antacid exposure. It has aluminium and calcium and other metals that's in its active ingredients. And so particularly where somebody had long-term doses of those things, you could imagine what did accumulate where that is, you see, and how much of that went to the pancreas, the kidneys, the brain, the thyroid. And so calcium carbonate antacid, given for an ulcer, how bad is that? Because it doesn't describe what could you do to have healed up that ulcer, where Jubb cell rejuvenation does. So someone's getting calcium that's derived from oyster shells and things, and it contains really large levels of lead and other things which gets deposited in the thyroid as well. And drugs like we often imagine acting a bit like Drano and rat toxin, of course, and those are things which commercial available sorts of remedy isn't natural, is a drug, and it does have heavy metals typical like magnesium stearate and stuff that's put where the pills are. So it's a combination of those heavy metals like aluminium and magnesium hydroxides and things, which end up making stone, you see, if somebody eats a lot of steak. So if you just get things from over the counter because you thought, oh, that must be safe, but what's there really is a certain amount of material which could be relentless daily and just tricking you to look at something else like a quick fix, but aluminium hydroxide and magnesium carbonate and magnesium trisilicate and things. Iodine, where it's deficient, it starts to be attracted to other metals and compounds instead, and yet iodide is only how you find things, and that you don't find a single molecule of itself, but you only can if something is, as I said, in an iodide state, which has got its enzymes versus being enzymatically resistant instead. So it becomes a single atom, and it has to. T4 breaks down to T3, and you've got a single atom there. Or you've got a single atom where 3 exists. One is then can come to be a single atom. It's drugs where things are enzymatic, could be resisting and causing a resistance over time of some effect, because, as I said, heavy metals cannot be so easy necessarily removed. And so it's a soft idea that you could have a little bit of a view and look into what's going on, and don't just think that something modern is ants pants. So the heavy metal toxicity is something which should be recognised, and that is a major condition where goiter enlargement might have been, and normal functioning of tissue was just getting an example of the thyroid, but you could be focused on the pancreas or the spleen or kidneys or the nerve force. And so where toxicity is and where micronutrient isn't, you've got a trigger to serve more of a cellular stress and hormonal imbalance. Nobody could say not. And so if you're looking at hypertrophy, where that's an enlarging of the pancreas, for instance, or the thyroid, some of that tissue could become more neoplastic or more, but excessive calcium from shells, shellfish, for instance, because that's just got enormous amounts of cadmium, and bromides then could come in there from bleached bread and things. And so what have we got? We've got a serious condition of chemicals wanting to cause stone to form and goiter, triggering thyroid cell hyperplasia and these sorts of things. And so you're increasing the number of cells and causing a rapid cell wall repair response, which is not in a proper terrain. And so where antacids would have been given, the danger of all that is that just the toxicness of where the tissue would have gone, and looking at improving an outcome, of course, where somebody has an organ removed, like a thyroidectomy, it really is, what are you doing is managing some complication like And should you certainly have good sunlight? Are you producing enough vitamin D? Are you getting enhanced absorption, more of the calcium that you have? Live food, of course, really lays attention where you are to stop neuritis and the tingling and the numbness and the cramps and things, and give you a proper function, which would ordinarily be like what's your parathyroids, where that would have been located, and give you a responsibleness of regulating blood calcium level. The biggest complication where you deal with anything is live food, for instance, is where somebody could have been missing an organ, like the thyroid, for instance, and vitamin D deficiency. And what have you got after that? You've got particular severe forms of significant associated developments of life colloidal clinical conditions of hypocalcemia, meaning low calcium. And so selenium is supposed to protect, and sure does, but what happens when you don't have that? It's nothing is being converted at a cellular level. And so vitamin A and B12 will support more metabolic thyroid function for the mitochondria of your body, and a performed primary role would be where the thyroid was, and we're talking about all the secondary system which performs something which is similar, like a basic conditioning of an enzyme having to be created because you've got enzymatic feedback loops, which something before, something after it in the feedback loop can then make what's missing. So without an organ, the body adapts itself, of course, but what we're talking about is what's ecological, a goiter nodule, or could come to have been neoplastic more, and stopping excessive glutathione and stopping excessive methionine, and the big phosphate foods, you're really stopping ulcers as a result of that also. You don't need to have any antacid after that, and things just get cleared up, you see. But otherwise, suddenly something else is going on. And so what's the nice background for the thyroid that gives you support? And what's easy for you to be able to have this all healed up? And what the price is more for a couple ingredients, more or less, where something is. It's really what you've got noticed more, where you've got a condition. It could be because, it was one of the symptoms you could feel is sort of dizziness and weakness and confusion sometimes, feeling or something non-responsive, or hot, cold, and low temperature not being able to be managed, but where swelling of the body and the face or the tongue is, or lower legs, one could say certain that something cystic fibrotic is, and like an organ like the thyroid could be affected. So skin rashes and this sort of excessive sweating. It's whereas synthetic, if that was consumed and not being able to be broken down properly, it really has all of these symptoms, and you've got much more greater increased risk of neoplasm. Yet where somebody is exhausted and achy, they could have degrees of heat shock protein and cold shock protein having been released by life colloid, and felt sort of flu-like and jittery where things are. So thyroid always is associated with symptoms of proper mental function is if you've got good thyroid function, or the opposite. And what it's related more to is your T3 intimately associated more with giving you energy, and where you don't really have that, you could have sort of more depressedness. But you've got selenium, and where's that coming from? You see, like a Brazil nut, for instance. But a comprehensive review of selenium, you can see key regulators where the thyroid is, and selenium, how important this is for this function where the body is, and mitochondria. You've got selenoprotein, which includes sort of its antioxidant, and you've got minor levels of what you should have of glutathione, which is in a pyridoxase. So it really is needed to deiodinase and have enzyme for this. So it's converting what would be just inactive to an active form, and you must have sufficient selenium, you see, to be able to have that function. Otherwise, gosh, you can see quite a few neuronal areas, like where hippocampus is and things like this, can become very susceptible. And so memory, short-term memory, and all these sorts of things could come to be not working as well. So what happens where selenium is used up, or rock salt forms just are used, you again see thyroid and cell mitochondria where stressedness is, and these enzymes are key, see, converting thyroxine. So where a less active forms are of thyroid hormone, it's biologically active, where it's broken down from T4 to T3, and selenium, if that was robbed from your body, it's going to be a cause more of goiter tissue to kind of forms, you see. So extraneous calcium gets trapped in deficient thyroid tissue. It's not broken down because you've got to have proper enzymes. Selenium is essential for maintaining that properly. And that's just a condition which really, if somebody had surgeries, it's what is the habit that went on to cause that, and anything has been done about that, you see, because surgery was something, but gosh, what happened to you where your habits have been ever since? So where elevated stress levels could be, a robbed selenium is typical, and you've got kidney and bladder and pancreas and nerve centers all impacted. So you've got a scavenging force, which otherwise is helping you clean and clear things, and the dose that you take and what have you, and how much isn't or is, and the dangers of where time is, of some lack calorie, yet to clear away toxin you need to have, proper nutrient and things. So keep in mind, of course, you've got a performance of energy because you've got something heavy more or less that can assist bring nutrient into the cell. And if we could clear up a few things which this talk is about today that you're listening to, first it would be because there's been a misunderstanding of enzymes first, where food is. And it's thought that because something was not found in the blood, obviously then it must have got broken down, it didn't go anywhere. Yet what we've just talked about is how enzymes are transported by immune cells. And so it's a false claim that cooked food is just fine, and no difference between that and food which is kept in some value of some enzymaticness, or enzymes are then applied or have, or something is in the meal to help where things are. So cooked food, nobody could say a debt doesn't exist afterward, and that it's necessary, of course, to be able to have living enzymes. So you've got zeta potential where nutrient is. So life food contains natural enzymes, of course, which you can see transported across our membrane through aromatic amino acid. So cells significant, really, where your digestion is. It's your body's ability to have enzyme, and then these are things which get transported everywhere by your immune cells. So are you really having any proper nectar if you don't have any enzyme, you see? And what would be the reason why nature put enzymes there for all of us to have? Google say that enzymes, or who programs Google, enzymes don't bother with it, type of a message, where enzyme isn't transported by the blood per se, but by lymphatic immune cells. Instead, you could find natural enzymes that boost immune system, and these enzymes, like the natural killer cells and things, otherwise all of that becomes denatured and deactivated where the stomach is, isn't a proper idea at all, actually. See, so the idea that enzymes are useless because of a faulty experiment where looking at them was where they looked to find them in the blood after a meal, and because they couldn't find it in the blood after the meal, they said, oh, well, there's no use for that. So, but the lymphatic system and the immune system and cells all transporting these enzymes through pie patch. Of course, you've got plenty of evidence where enzymes come in, it helps clear up gas and this sort of things. It helps with food being broken down, and PAPAN and these things all help clear by the enzyme helping clear up things. And so you've got the stomach and upper stomach acid and our body's digestive process where digestive enzyme is. Otherwise, and if it wasn't in the food, then you've to have that called forward. So a modern version really where we are of good health is this mucusless diet, which is like food. So in reality, digestive systems really have evolved more to produce everything that you need through life colloid transmutation. And these ideas sort of disarm a lot of other things which could have gone on. Food processing, of course, being made more easier to digest, but high processed refined food in excess and these sorts of things can be over the top, a sediment that just forms. And where all of that is, where's your enzyme in it? Generally not too much. So cook refined food effectively is not got any proper enzyme in it, and how does that impact the immune system? It sure impacts it quite a bit. So it's a fact that a micromolecule and macromolecule, where carbohydrate, fat, and protein is, you can't find the micronutrient much. It's not effectively properly broken down. And so it's an example of where somebody ate food and wrong combos caused the pancreas to be shut down, which is to look into. This is what this work's about. So the pancreas enzymes or otherwise should be there, and without those enzymes, where's your digestion for all sorts of things? So food enzymes, like we said, move through the pie patches in the intestine, and that's a process that's critical for activating mucosal immune response and this sort of thing, and transporting enzymes through the body. So enzymes are actively transported, of course, through immune cells, and you've got the upper stomach, and where no nutrient would have been, you've got just an acidness, and you've got pie patches where a group of lymphocyte follicles are located, of course, in the lamina propria of the submucosa of the intestinal tract. And this is where blood is made, in the lamina propria, you see, of the submucosa. So it's a process called aggregation, fusion, and differentiation of double spore building block. And this is what is scientific. It causes our work to be distinctioned from what other things are going on. But immunity, where a drug would cause a disease or like diarrhea, and then where the pious patches are, how does that impact the pathogenesis more of that autoimmune condition that could have gone on like celiac or Crohn's? So it's really blood which is made not in the long bone as it was seen. Doesn't mean that it isn't. It just says that a long time ago when they looked at starving chickens, they noted, like back in Germany in 1868 and long before this, that they saw that the chicken bones, where the chickens were starved, blood would be formed from the marrow. And so, a woman comes along, Florence Sabin, in 1925, of course, and picks up a couple of other people, Charles Doan and Robert Cunningham, and the three of them redo this experiment to do the same thing. And it's really what's gone on with starved chickens. But it's stupid because they didn't ever look at what wasn't a starved condition per se, and how blood actually is reverse differentiated from fat cells and how it is made in the intestine. So science where things are a long time ago, Florence Sabin, for instance, she and the others didn't really consider how blood is made, where a chicken wouldn't have been fasted. It's really pioneering where somebody would have been a medical scientist, and it could even be the first woman where somebody's holding a full professorship in these things, where Hopkins School of Medicine is, and be elected to a whole range of Academy of Science, what have you. But the ideas where this is extensive, where the work is. And what is it? Slippery slope. It's focused on lymphatic system and the origin of blood cell. Wrong. And it doesn't come to be this way at all. Where the immune system is, it's just you've got things off the charts. And the theory doesn't explain what this research's work does, where red blood corpuscle has got totipotency. So blood is made not by mitotic cell division, which no essay could ever show how it could be. Nothing in the world. But this is only like back there, what we're talking about is a theory, where we're talking about some grand unified totality instead, like a quanta. So you've got a mitotic rate which has never been observed and could never be to account for all the red blood corpuscle that would have to be produced for the day. And it really isn't a single assay which could show anything like that. And so what becomes to be aggregated by double spore, aggregating, fusing and differentiating into a red blood corpuscle, which then itself has totipotency, meaning it can become anything that's needed at the site of injury or whatever's needed where the body is. And so somatotyping is the epistemological science of a hierarchical logical typing of how environmental forces have affected our species and other species. So this is called somatotyping. And so what you eat and the enzymes that you have and all this sort of thing, the strength of the upper stomach and that, you're not a flesh eater and you're certainly not a herbivore, you're not a grainivore or a seedivore, but you certainly are a frugivore. So somatotyping is where somebody looks at all the digestive tracts and you categorize things to fit more or less into the food groups that animals or species eat. And you can see more or less where each animal more or less falls into a set sort of category. So a frugivore really is food, and it comes from the body of a flower. So, a Brazil nut is a fruit, and so is a broccoli. So where somebody is only eating flesh, they didn't have a notion at all that animal enzymes to break that down don't exist in the body. And eating animals, like there's surfactant and things, animals sort of are certain that there's a strict condition where things go on, basically. It doesn't mean that you might find animals that would never, ever be around a garbage dump and suddenly just eating stuff out of the garbage dump. So it's what's not natural, or what is. It's our species which fits exactly into a single category, more as a frugivore in somatotyping, and the acid of the upper stomach being the case to show such, and the small amount of hydrochloric acid that's produced also to show such, whereas an omnivore or a carnivore has a totally different amount of hydrochloric acid, and it's not of the same strength per se. So our species really should be looked at as far as our proper somatotyping is, and the classification of our body fitting closely more to where food somatotyping is and its relatedness, and the classifying this. It's really a method that's developed you and I to have a qualifiedness where shape and composition of our body comes to be. So you've got three body types where somatotyping is. You've got the ectomorph, you've got the mesomorph, you've got endomorph, and also you've got colloidal biology where blood is being formed in the intestine, and you've got lung and fat cells ordinarily also producing red blood corpuscle, and hematopoiesis, which is the process of blood formation. It all forms into blood corpuscle, and that's not a cell. And if you look at Google, it's just not making any distinctions like this, you see. So words like cell, there is no such thing as a red blood cell. So it's not a cell. It doesn't have any DNA in it. So where does it say that anywhere? It doesn't really, see. So the blood corpuscle forms from a process of aggregation, fusion, and those double spore building blocks, they can fit 1,500 sort of broadside across each other to make up a red blood corpuscle. You've got these red blood corpuscles differentiating, de-differentiating, reverse differentiating into what's needed, including becoming a red blood corpuscle, pleomorphing into a red blood corpuscle. So blood is formed mainly in the intestine, and you could see a form also coming from fat cells releasing the double spore that aggregate, fuse, and of course reverse differentiating from the fat cell into a red blood corpuscle. And under starved condition, of course, you could see some reversed side tissue being turned into a red blood corpuscle. Because red blood corpuscle is totipotent, it can have made what the cell is there, and the cell can be turned back into a red blood corpuscle. So all tissue where you've got red blood corpuscle, you've got an oxygenetic sort of immune cell like an astrocyte, for instance, and double spore where a red blood corpuscle becomes fixated somewhere. Its double spores aggregate, fuse, and differentiate into a immune cell right there, and you can see DNA forming where no nucleic acid was before this under the microscope. So an observation that's noting how most have just thought, oh, bone marrow is where that is, but didn't consider where else all of that is being made, and the subject bias of that slippery slope and reasoning has centered around the long bone marrow activity, and only researchers missing the links which would look and find the proper truth, and have some theory which is totally wrong. So how blood could come from mitotic cell division and that sort of thing is just a theory, and it completely can't be explained logically whatsoever. It's totally up the park wrong. Anyway, just to wrap things up today, I think it's amazing. My teacher, Cloud, 2 children, Annie and I studied with for some years, and 9 years of that sort of was being on the road a lot where Cloud is. And I just remember Cloud ordering me more to attend to eye awareness and to be outward lived more as an example, so I'd really have attention to what's absolute, and space, of course, which is nothing, which is what this is. So for me, it's simply following the instruction, of course, to travel a road less travelled, and not to have any technique at all, but in particular, not have any, like a course of breath or body work ongoing or anything, not anything turned on or off, but yet a sitting, living, walking meditation in eye awareness. And it's just having perfect detachment. So it's a practice of a spontaneous creative intelligence and having access to this. If you look over where all the places are somebody can have left themselves behind, it's happening, I'd say. It's really you're noting whatever turnedness is, it's really toward and not away from. And yet the use of the vestibular sense where whole brain patterning is more present, that you are getting a message which is more congruent and integrated, a greater focus is, and all this comes about because eye awareness is your perfect detachment or mind, and that where the sense of awareness is, all of that is wrapped simple with care. And shouldn't we be empty the most we can to be receptive? I think it's simple, isn't it? It's even just blunt like itself. Yet your inductive and deductive reasoning should be the state of mind where you are. That's not, this is a being, not a state of mind. And so my teacher, Cloud, told me sort of really about the path of excellence and how powerful what this is as a solvent. It's sort of where everyone else is. It's sort of really a pleasure bank and a fear bank, and having some stickiness to those banks. And this is about you becoming unstuck and being able to learn ever more, to be attracted to, not to be attracted to the bank at all, but to the flow and remaining in the flow. So it's living in eye awareness more an empty center and care, where this is just wrapped, it's your I am sort of being. And when I met Cloud many years ago, just like everyone most that she connected with, I was really told I wasn't anything. I'd have to have taken myself for, and I'd be discovering ever more who is living, who is real. And this, for me, was really a note observed. That's something you and I have over perception and not perception itself as just sensation. Yeah, this is something which is discoverable for you who is real. So for me, I just took Cloud's advice, and because this is me trusting where things are, I just really only allowed what I was told, and then wherever leisure or recreation's ever been, it's really been for me ever since to lift my hands for others as much as I can where this work is, where timelessness is more where the message is. So anyway, I hope you really enjoyed where the message is today. It's a bit of science that is behind the work. And for me, I think I've spent looking over all the places which I've left myself behind where silence is certain. It's a striking, of course, difference that it makes, that you have what's really beautiful and transparent for everyone. Lukey, yeah.